I need an intro, but who cares, right? Today we're ranking some Elden Ring bosses, and this is mostly coming from what everybody's guessing right now, the Elden Ring DLC reveal of Shadows of the Earth Tree, which we don't know anything about, but I will happily be a side character while you all go on the main journey, because I might not get it. But yeah, special rules for this boss ranking, right? I'm going to rank bosses separately from their phases, right? Because I feel like some bosses like Malekith and Beast Clergyman are so different in the spectrum of difficulty to me. Like, I find Beast Clergyman much harder than Malekith, but I find Malekith really easy. I feel like he won't warrant the spot. I don't want to put Beast Clergyman in the middle of the list due to like Malekith weighing him down. So this really gets through my head and what I personally want to say about the bosses individually. So yeah, enough about this, right? Helping my boss list stand out. So yeah, let's just get into it.
Waiting, fresh and pure.
Coming in at last place, Renala's first phase. You know the song and dance. Well, hell, right now only the song because just hit the kids who are singing, then just wail on a defenseless woman, honestly. Her gimmick doesn't work too well for early game. Now you might not be able to output damage to one cycle her, but that doesn't matter, especially with her just standing there to where there aren't many threatening things in the fight. The chandelier can be threatening, and she can also break your poise easily, but there's nothing else to the fight other than that.
And the majesty of the night she conjureth.
Now, coming in at second to last is Renala's second phase, Renala, Queen of the Full Moon. She provides good early game difficulty, not only because you won't have enough health or you won't have enough stamina. The staff does decent amount of damage, so you at least have to respect it a bit, right? And she also has good coverage with her magic spells, and she can also back up to where or you're at least forced to respect her, and you have to chase her down. And you also can't land many charged R2 attacks, so you can't break her poise really fast. And she has moves to where it gives her invincibility first, so you can stop wailing on her. But her main problem is that she doesn't have enough time to get the range needed on you to spam, right? She is forced to constantly be up close in your face because she doesn't have a good enough attack to where she could just get distance on you. And like when showing in the recording, even that early game, you can still overwhelm her a bit. And sadly enough, she staggers a lot, and you can break her poise. This is the reason why she lands at this spot. Third to last is Malekith, the Black Blade. Now, I made a whole video on him, but let's just go over it again. He suffers from bad hitboxes to where you can just run in front of him most of the time. Now, he does have some attacks to where you just can't do this, but his death slashes, you could just run in between them, right? And get a free punish off of this attack, right? But he does have some good stuff. He pumps out a lot of damage with his death gimmick, right? But after that, what else is there to him after that? You can punish a lot of his attacks with fully charged R2s, hurting his poise more, and just running into him like that to where he does have a good recovery move. He also suffers from the light roll buff to where Death and Death isn't as threatening since you can roll away from it much faster now. And you can just get another fully charged R2 hit when he does this attack at neutral. So he just suffers from bad hitboxes. That's what lands him at this spot. Sadly enough for Malekith. Coming in at this spot, the Regal Ancestor Spirit. I came into this fight a bit over level, but even with that, he can still do a good bit of damage to me. And he drags his body quite well with his hitboxes, right? But he suffers from being a bit too simple. I can't really say what's easy about him since I don't fight him much. But he has no clear strafe pattern to me immediately, and he can also heal himself. I just came here over level for that. He could be higher, but you know, the other bosses I find are just harder. Now, Moog, Lord of Blood comes at this spot. He has a good set of stuff, right? He has Blood Loss, Blood Flame, and he also has good amount of delayed attacks. So what's wrong with him? He suffers a lot from his delayed attacks to where you can just strafe them and use fully charged R2s on them. Like this Blood Talent, for instance, to where you can fully charge R2 and use an additional R1. This racks up in a lot of poise break damage, right? Which I break his poise like that. It's really easy to break Mode's poise, especially with his countdown sequence to where it has an obvious gap to where you can just straight to the side, land an R2 and an R1. This doesn't help that I'm going to land another fully charged R2. Now, after this attack sequence, which his attack sequences are fine, but they're nothing too dangerous. Now, they have their slight delays in them, but they're nothing you can't learn fairly fast. To where I easily broke his poise again, and I managed to land my full weapon art. Now, he does have some points to where his hitboxes are fairly big, and they're delayed attacks, so they can just throw you off. But he suffers too much from his delayed attacks, having too much recovery from him. That's all I have to say about Mode. He just suffers a lot from fully charged R2s. Next spot is Moog the Omen. So I have all the same criticisms for him. With delayed attacks, fully charged R2s, what's the difference with him? Well, he doesn't have the countdown, so that makes him harder to deal with, and you can break his poise less. And his arena is also worse since you could get caught on the objects here. So yeah, not much to say about him. He's just like Moog, but you know, without the countdown, and he's easier than Lord of Blood. So yeah, on to the next person. Next up, the being that devours gods, the god-devouring serpent. Let's get out the way. The Serpent Hunter really does make this fight easy, especially with all the heavy attacks you can land on this thing, making it easy to break its poise, and just rack up damage easily. But he has nice attack patterns with good delays in them, and he can use the arena to cover some of his attacks like that, right? And don't get me started on the eruption attack to where it goes full screen, and you have to be really fast to dodge it. But he does suffer from, like I said before, really a lot of charged attacks to where you can break his poise really easily. And the Serpent Hunter gives you enough range to where you can safely range him out. A boss I don't like, Godfrey the Philistine Lord, or Godfrey, is a boss that suffers from, you guessed it, strafing from the right. Now he does have good attacks, or Stone Stomp is not easily punishable by jumping attacks, but he suffers the most from his attacks being strafable. And you can easily get fully charged R2s or weapon arts off of that, which can break his poise really easily. And he leaves himself wide open for attacks. Stone Stop is good for catching your roll, but overall, he doesn't pose much of a threat, especially with how easy he can break his poise and how simple his attack strings are. So yeah, the first Elden Lord goes down. What did you expect? He is literally the same boss. That's why I hate Godfrey. He just ruins the actual fight of Godfrey. But let's get into what makes this boss weak. You probably heard it before. But yes, he suffers from the strafing problem again. Hell, I'm surprised I don't consider him easier because of the buffing he has. He only has like a few new attacks that don't change the fight that much. His buff just allows you to break his poise in phase 2 from the start, and just gives you more openings. Now, what makes him harder? Well, the full screen stomp, that's all. It just makes him not strafable. My favorite boss in Elden Ring, Godric the Grafted. But that's another topic. Has the same problems as Godfrey, where you can easily strafe him to the right, which is a bigger problem for him since he has lower poison those bosses before. But he does have a good move in Stormcaller to where it's damn near instant starter, can at least force pressure to where you don't want to stand near him, and can combo into each other. And he is a bit more aggressive with his attacks being a bit more dangerous. But he does have one really damaging move to him, which is the Stormcaller Crash, right? To where you can just land 2 fully charged R2 if you're lucky enough, and just get another poise break. But, like I said before, he does have really weak poise. But his buff of face has an advantage, unlike Godfrey's, to where it actually does reduce damage, which actually lands him here at this spot. Alright, so now we're at the midpoint of the list, to where these bosses can trip me up more than the last section of bosses, to where I found those really easy. These guys, I could consider easy, but they still trip me up. So let's start off with Star Scourge or General Radon, whichever one you want to go by. Beginning section isn't too hard, right? The arrows have a bit of delay to them, but nothing too hard. And the arrows can also get caught on objects. And with the spread shot arrows, they usually are so spread out that they can't usually hit you all at once, and it's minimal damage. Sorry for the audio cut, I like the recording. But yeah, his delayed attacks are pretty good, with them being pretty wide and having good delay to them, so they trip you up. But his main problem is that you could just hide in his crotch for some of his attacks and only dodge one time, which is pretty bad, especially when it can encourage stupid moves like this, to where I use my Ash of War, which I'm completely standing still by the way, only got hit one time. Now let's go into the buff up phase, to where you can punish his buff up, just don't stand under the sword to get free damage. Then the Star Color Cry initiating scene, right? You could get even more damage, then punish the burst, which I only chose to punish with my Ash of War here, which wasn't a smart move. And it also gives him a bit of recovery time to where I do my Ash of War, then I rolled out of it just to punish him. Now a new attack here, right, is Gravity Wave, right? To where he jumps up in the air and crashes down. You can jump over it, and I just mess up. Now that's the main thing with this recording, is that I'm playing really bad, but I'm still able to do this good. And this is another thing with Radon, that he's so big that you could just land far away attacks like that. Now granted, my sword is also long, but still, his wideness does not help. Well, that's all for his phase 1. Let's go on to the next boss. Estelle, Natural Born of the Void, comes at this spot. Number 23. Let's start off with the positive. His range attack is really good. It has a slight bit of delay, but comes out really fast, so you have to be aware. One problem with him is that you can run under some of his melee attacks, and they're just telegraphed enough with his body shifting enough to where you can tell what's going on. The Star Explosions help though with adding more pressure with his melee attacks, even though they're easy to dodge, right? And this also doesn't help that he'll sometimes do a tail attack in front of him that you could get enough time to launch a fully charged R2. Now, poise breaking him, even though it is good, you have to be aware that he gets up really fast, which is a positive for him. Sorry. Just ate something. But yeah, after that, I won't count his phase 2 as something different like the other bosses. So yeah, he still counts here, which phase 2 isn't really that much different. The meteor attack, it can be unpredictable on where it lands, right? But if you do manage to get it or dodge under all of them, right, you can just easily land a fully charged R2, which doesn't help him. Now, with how fast his melee attacks come out, they're still easy and predictable to dodge, right? Which leads me to another poise break. That's another thing about Estelle. His poise is not that hard to break. So yeah, this lands him here at this spot. Not too difficult melee attacks, which just leads him to right here. His teleport can be a bit threatening, but yeah, that's all I have to say about Estelle. Next boss. I know this looks awkward, but bear with me, right? Next up is Shia's Gang Squad. Now, I'm not saying it's awkward because they're above Estelle, right? No, I generally think they're harder, right? With the pressure that they can exude, especially being a gank fight, with Lionheart being able to summon those skulls to add more pressure. But I mostly say it's awkward because I'm here at endgame, right? Which I'm just spamming waves of gold. But yeah, they're mostly here because I don't have much else to say about them. I think they're harder than Estelle, mostly because they're a gank fight, and they can just put a lot of pressure on you. I've died before actually completing it, even with the Sacred Relic Sword. So yeah, they just mostly come here because they're a gank fight. That's all. Rykar, the Lord of Blasphemy, comes at this spot. Alright, he's not that difficult. So yeah, let's start off with some positives. His attacks are really wide, especially with his size, right? He could delay them just enough to where his hitbox is still active. It could go under the ground and just trip you up, especially with how he drags himself, right? To where there's still a hitbox. So yeah, that's one positive. He has some quick and fast attacks, right, that don't really do that much, especially since I was out of range for that one. Now let's talk about the skull phase, to where you could get off 3 fully charged R2s here. You could get off more, but I just didn't have the stamina for it. Now this phase is pretty good for him since you're forced to run away. If you're just that confident that you're not going to die to the skulls, then you can probably kill him right here. But with this, right, you're forced to run away from the skulls if you just don't want to take a lot of damage. But they're not that hard to dodge, just run away from them, while his Blasphemous Blade just can't reach you. I wish they made it go further, but hey, that's another time for another story. Alright, so yeah. Now, let's talk about some of his hitboxes, right, because they're a bit small, like this one, for example. But let's talk about another factor in the fight, right? When you lower his health down to a certain portion, the snake will start coming out at you, and this is a good way to trip you up in the fight, especially for how fast the snake can come at you. Also, with him being pretty long too, he actually extends further than Rykard. But nothing else to say really about Rykard. He's pretty easy, especially with the Serpent Hunter. Moog, Lord of Blood, is at this spot, right? Number 20. Sorry for the yawning, I just woke up. But yeah, let's talk about really good positives, because I'm surprised I put him down this low. Now, he starts flying, and with the crash down, he's damn near unpunishable with how fast he throws out attacks now during that sequence. And he spews out a lot more blood flame, to where if you get blood loss, it can combo to his hits sometimes. Negatives, that he still can be fully charged R2 punished most of the time with some of his attacks. Now, he is faster, right, and he's still harder to punish, which his poise can recover better now. But he still has some really basic attack strings. And let's use this one as another example of like a fully charged R2 hit being able to punish him. And that's one main problem with Moog, even though I list out some of those positives, that he's still the same old Moog when you come down to it. He has some more unpunishable attacks, right, like the fork stab, to where I tried to punish him with the fully charged jumping R2, but he managed to hit me. But then he just threw out a delayed attack to where he can recover fast enough, and I just managed to get a fully charged R2. Now let's go to this sequence now, to where I run under his poke, fully charged R2, run behind him, fully charged R2 again. You really do get the point here, right? He is so susceptible to these types of attacks, right? To where he has to take so long to actually recover. And I deliberately was kind of stupid here. I didn't finish him because he just chooses to walk away without even actually attacking me. I don't even know if any of his attacks would have been fast enough, but still, right? Moog just suffers from his terrible close combat, especially with this horrible recovery time to actually get out of the attacks he sends out of you, especially his delayed ones. So yeah, Moog, Lord of Blood, second phase, ends up at number 20. Alright, number 19, the big guy himself, Fire Giant. Now, where do I start with him? First thing I'll start off with is fire attacks. First of all, his fire orb is pretty dangerous, especially when it doesn't go away for a long time. You're forced to roll into it if you want to get rid of it faster, right? His hitboxes are pretty large too, especially with that one, right? To where I basically had to be pixel perfect to dodge it. His ankle is pretty easy to aim at, especially since he doesn't have many defenses down there to like really defend you from like wailing on it. But his fire pillars are really dangerous though, for them being able to trap you sometimes, like that situation, and them being really close to you and doing a good bit of damage. His hitboxes are still pretty wide, and due to his sheer height, right, he can sometimes take away the camera from you, which can make it frustrating. Overall, Fire Giant lands here for his big damage, his fire attacks, and yeah, that's all. Melania, the Blade of Mikola, the woman who has never known defeat, ends up at number 18. She has good qualifications of being difficult, right? She's fast, does a lot of damage, right? And especially has her own special gimmicks, right? Especially with one of them being healing and Waterfowl Dance. Now, Waterfowl Dance isn't too hard. At a certain threshold, she'll do the attack, right? It's not too hard to dodge, like I said. All you just have to understand is just run away from the first section. The other two are fairly hard to dodge. The third one can be a bit tricky, especially since it's going over your head. But you can also bait it out with the range attack, making it easier to dodge because you're at a safe distance, making it easier. And let's talk about some of her charge blade moves, to where you can punish nearly all of them with just fully charged R2s, right? I strafed that one, which is makes it easier to dodge, and you can just punish this, right, with just a jumping R2. This can lead to easier poise breaks against her, which she doesn't have much poise anyway. Then we also have the sword slam move, to where she tries to lunge at you from a distance, another fully charged R2 punish. You can also bait out the kick and get a punish there, but it won't always be a punish. The switchblade move is really good since it recovers a lot of health for her, and she also recovers really fast from poise break. But yeah, let's go on to some more weaknesses, right? To where she suffers the most from her poise being low, right? While yeah, she'll have some initial burst of super armor, right? Sometimes when you hit her a lot, it does hinder her, especially when you could sometimes interrupt her combos like that right there. And she also really relies on those little bursts of super armor But overall, Melania can be difficult, especially with like waterfowl dance. But when she's not doing it, she's really easy to read, nothing too difficult to dodge, and she's really easy to punish, right? Especially with the lower poise. So yeah, this is what lands Melania at this spot of the list. Elden Beast lands at number 17. Let's start off with this starter attack to where you can land 2 attacks, especially your weapon art. The fire is really easy to dodge. Just go behind him. And hell, look at how much damage I did with that sequence, right? His melee attacks are really bad though. They are his weakest spot to where they're easy to dodge, and you can also land fully charged R2s. The main thing about them is that they're just delayed, which if once you realize that they're easy to dodge, you can just land a lot of fully charged R2s. But he also has good attacks to where if you stay under him, he'll retaliate. Especially the sword stab to where it's hard to see with your camera right because he moves in an awkward position and it's hard to see. And it's also pretty hard to dodge, especially with the delayed attacks in there with the swipe. Now, in second phase, this is where it just starts becoming crazy because he starts mixing more attacks. With Elden stars, the rings aren't easy. Oh, no, sorry, they are easy to dodge. Just jump over them. But then it's like you have to deal with this dust cloud. Then he starts just throwing these sword slashes at me, which is just hard to deal with, especially oppressive, right? And you can't just get close to his ranged attacks with like attacks like Ways to Go just pushing you backwards. So yeah, that's why Elden Beast lands at this spot with his high poise, his unbelievable pressure, his high health, especially coming after Radagon. He lands at this spot with all that. Elden Beast, goodbye. Number 16, second phase Godric. Let's start off with some weaknesses. His startup attack in this phase can leave him to get poise break, especially since his poise is not that good. And you could just run into him. And his Earthshake attack, while being good for having multiple crashes down, styles the delay to where you can run away. And you can punish it with the fully charged R2, but I just happen to miss mine. Now, what are some positives about this boss? His Dragonfire Breath right here, I got lucky and dodged it, but it can still F you up, especially with the spread it has, and it can just ground you if you're not careful. He still has good aggression to where you can be oppressed a little, and while his attacks are still strafable, he still poses a good challenge, especially in early game. Now, even with that, he still has major weaknesses like I said, but still has the positives of Godric, like Stormcaller to where I instantly had to back up. And the new fire damage that he has now is really good. Overall, he lands here because of his aggression, his new attacks. While some of them do make him a bit weaker, I say most of them do, right? He still provides a good enough chance to where I say yes, he lands this spot. Number 15, Star Scourge Radahn's second phase is really good, especially with the new moves he has. Gravity Drill, the move to where he goes up in the sky and swipes at you, isn't too noteworthy for me personally. But the gravity balls that he sends at you are really good, especially if he combos you on Torrent to where you can't properly dodge on Torrent. Now, the meteorites that he summons are also really good because they're hard to dodge and you can get punished while trying to hit him during that attack sequence. But he still has the problems of Phase 1 Radahn to where you can hide in his cross for some attacks, right? And Starcaller Cry is just as weak as Phase 1, right? To where he still has a lot of recovery frames. And I didn't know whether to count this as a Phase 1 or 2 problem. But Radahn in Phase 2, right? You could just hit him during his stage transition and damn near kill him. But that still doesn't take away from his high damage and his good attacks. And you can also run under him. So yes, the General or Star Scourge lands at number 15. So long, man. Horlu, Chieftain of the Badlands, lands at number 14. A negative to the fight, the beginning grab in this phase, depending on how much poise damage you do, you can instantly break his poise and get massive damage off. But a good thing to him is that even though he takes normal damage during his buff up phase, you can also take big damage in retaliation, which means you have to be careful, which is a good, especially since the last time he didn't have such a good start off with his buff up phase. But now with his grab attacks, you can also hit him in between them, and you'll have enough time to recover. And he's still susceptible to strafing, right? Especially with what I did here, the way I went behind him and him with the fully charged R2. But it's a bit hard to break his poise, especially with how wild he is. And with this buff up being that it's full screen now, you can't strafe him and it's harder to heal against him, so you just can't run away. But you can perfectly position yourself to where you can fully punish a grab with the fully charged R2. And he still has some attacks to where he's susceptible to fully charged R2s, but he can still kill you in one mistake. So with that, Horlu lands at this spot. Not much else to say about him. He's just difficult to me, especially with, like, I don't want to say high damage, with his speed. Yeah, I'll go with that. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. The last 13 bosses will be in part 2 with some final statements. So yeah, I'm just curious on how this is going to go. And yeah, this has been a bit fun so far, but I can do better.